Good morning. Welcome to Friday Cafe. I'm Judy Carson with the Connecticut State Department of Education. It's my pleasure to have you join us today for this very special session of Friday Cafe. I know every session is special, but they just keep getting better. We're really glad you're here. This is the third in a series of sessions on listening to families during COVID-19. This is something that the field asked for, so this idea came from you. And today we're going to be talking with parent leaders who will be guiding our session. I want to let you know that we've added a fourth session based on your request. We will be convening again on June 19th. We'll send out a note to everybody to let you know, but please mark your calendars. I want to let you know that we'll be introducing guests from the Parent Leadership Training Initiative who are going to talk with us, and we're focusing today centering parent voice. We've been talking about listening to families, and today the families are guiding our session, and we're going to hear directly from them about their experiences during COVID-19. I want to thank my co-host and partner, Betsy Laborious, and I want to describe her as my friend and colleague with the word intrepid. And so I don't often use the word intrepid, so I actually looked it up. It means fearless and adventurous. So if any of you know Betsy, you know that that's a good description of her. And I'm joined also by my colleagues, Mar Claudio and Francisco Gratis, who are doing the magic behind the scenes. I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Dr. Regina Hopkins from the State Department of Education's Turnaround Office, who has been our partner in planning this series of sessions for you. So here's what we're going to do today as we Zoom at Friday Cafe. Everybody's muted, and we hate to do that. We love to talk to all of you, but we have just so many people joining us today that we have to start out with that protocol. So for those of you who have been to Friday Cafe before, you're familiar with our goals and values, but what we're here about is building connections, expanding our thinking by interacting with other people doing this work, and valuing the very important work of family engagement. I have to tell you, this week I was especially looking to joining you today. It's been a really tough week in America. A lot of things are happening now during COVID-19 that are stressful for so many people and disproportionately stressful for some of our most vulnerable families. Someone described it as fatigue, and we can definitely see that sense. And I think Friday Cafe is that place where we can come. One of our values is to have a restorative time with people who are doing this difficult work, and that is a large part of what we're about. We also call this a safe lab, and we take that seriously. We've never done this kind of thing before, and you all have been so gracious in joining us. And today especially, our session is jointly owned and equal voices with families. So we're honored that you're here to take part in this. I want to turn it over to the intrepid Betsy Laborious, who's going to introduce our conversation catalyst for today.
Intrepid Betsy is here. Judy, thank you so much for the introduction. As Judy said, I work at Capital Region Education Council, but I also manage the statewide Family Engagement Center grant, and I'm pleased that so many of our advisory members are here today. But what I would like to do, and most important right now, is to introduce Melvet Hill. And I've known Melvet for many years, but I'm just gonna kind of describe a few things about her. She is a parent, a civic leader, and she is a warrior for social justice in our state. We have a very robust family engagement parent training program, PLTI, here in Connecticut, and that is in large share because of Melvet's efforts here in Connecticut. And so I would like to turn it over to not only my esteemed colleague here in Connecticut, but also my friend Melvet. There you go, Melvet.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Betsy and Judy. And I also would like to say that joining us today on our panel is Yukio Ida, Ray Ali, and Christina Cervellon, who are parents who have graduated from the Parent Leadership Training Institute. So today we're all here to really kind of engage in a discussion and learn a little bit about how some parents are experiencing this distance learning space during COVID-19, and really to connect that to family engagement during this time, and how we as parent leaders are working with school districts across the state, and how that plays out in real time and experience. So this first slide you'll see is family engagement during COVID-19. This is one way that we are seeing family engagement play out in our state and in our communities. On the left side, you'll see some cars and bus and announcements and flyers, posters from the Danbury community as they were getting ready to start distance learning. My favorite picture on this page has to be, "We miss all of you, be good to your parents." Right? So that's the teachers encouraging the students, be good to your parents. We know how you are during the day. Be good with your parents during this learning time. We also see that teachers were missing students. So you see Ms. Schultz there from another school district saying that she misses them, right? So this takes time and effort. And you also can see the lines of cars that are there with people going through neighborhoods, giving shout outs to both students and teachers. Next slide, please. Also during this time, what does parent engagement and parent voice look like? So as part of my work with the Parent Leadership Training Institute, which is also a national initiative, it's in 55 communities around the country, we hosted Parent Voice in the era of COVID, media and public policy. So we wanted to make sure we provided some tools and resources for parents to engage and share about their experiences during this time, especially as it related to distance learning. And then on the top right, you'll see that the Parent Leadership Institute, Training Institute went virtual. We usually host in-person sessions. And so now we had to do like everyone else and go to Zoom meetings. And so you'll see at the top right, people engaging. And finally, you know, a lot of people are calling distance learning crisis schooling. And so the National Parent Leadership Institute sent out an encouraging message to parents around the country during Teachers Appreciation Week, right? Because now parents, even though we know parents are the first teacher in their child's lives, now many parents have been thrust into a role they didn't expect, to be that daytime educational provider. And so as we look at what's happening in Connecticut and what's happening with all of you, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a school administrator, or something else, we know that everyone has good intentions. And the good intention is to do what's best for children. It's also to make sure that we are communicating and that there's this two-way communication that's happening. In many cases, we call that a feedback loop. And so we'll talk a little bit about feedback loops later. But one of the things that we have heard and seen is that parent leaders have not stopped leading. And they are leading in their homes, they're leading in their communities, and they are still leading for children. And so through this leadership, we want to have a discussion with our panel, if you can go to the next slide, about some ways that they are communicating and working with their school districts during this time. So we have the questions on the screen for your benefit and for the panelists' benefit. And I would like to invite the panelists to ready themselves. So our first panelist who will address this first question will be Christina. And Christina, we'll start with you. During this time of the COVID-19 pandemic and distance learning, what were the top 2 challenges you and your family experienced or are still experiencing?
Well, my name is Christina Cervellon. I am from Bristol. I have a 6-year-old son who's in 1st grade. So these are coming from our experiences for where he's at grade level wise. I do have a student who receives an IEP, and two of the top challenges have been receiving accommodations through the distance learning platform. Especially some of the stuff is difficult to access for a student with disabilities. For example, some of the technology, like instead of having worksheets, the kids are using the computer to input answers, but my 6-year-old doesn't spell well yet and he doesn't type. So that's been difficult, and the cost to print a lot of the materials. We set up a classroom here in our home so that I could be better organized and provide some of the similar supports that he was receiving in the classroom here at home so we can move through the curriculum. The second piece that has been difficult is the inadequate technology. We were given a Chromebook, and I know a lot of students here in our districts were given Chromebooks, but I know for my son, the platform that the distance learning is being performed on is not the best compatible for the Chromebook. Instead, so that he could have more options to be a little bit more interactive by using like a stylus, he's been using the Microsoft Surface Pro. And that's been a little bit easier because that way some materials we won't have to print, and he can work directly on the computer tablet system itself, which I think reduced one barrier.
Thank you, Christina. And Ray, if you can share your top 2 challenges as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Ali, and 2020 PLTI graduate. I represent the Naugatuck School District. I have a 4th grader and a 5th grader. 4th grader from Hopbrook Elementary School, 5th grader from Cross Street Intermediate, who's currently on an IEP. Our top 2 challenges that my family has experienced, and please keep in mind it's a work in progression, were twofold. It was an educational challenge on one end and a family challenge on one end. And I would say the first week was very overwhelming. The first 3 weeks, however, was very challenging. One, it was on the educational challenge, it was adapting and learning everyone's schedule at the start. I have a work schedule, my wife has a work schedule. Now the kids have schedules for school. We had to prioritize a routine because of those schedules. We had to get acquainted with working from home, with everyone being at home. 2, we had to secure a private workspace for everyone. I usually work from home and I have an office here, and we weren't prepared to have everyone work from home. And so we had to secure some type of workspace for everyone to have their privacy to work. And then the challenge of parents transitioning into becoming teachers, learning how to cope in teaching our children at home, especially our 5th grader on the IEP, and educating our children on COVID-19 and the reality of it, and the family challenges were explaining to our children and educating them on why they can't have play dates, why they cannot go to school, why they can't have their friends over or go over to their friends' homes, and why, most importantly, families can't come over or we can't go over to them. So those were the 2 top challenges for us. It's a work in progression. It has, the impact has eased, and we're working through it like everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And Yukio?
Good morning. My name is Yukio Ida, and I have a middle schooler, West Hartford Public School System. And first, I just really like everyone for being here and taking the time to listen to the parent voice, and to, you know, take that back to your communities and try to apply it in some way. So thank you again for taking this time. So I have a middle schooler, and you know, she's a little bit older than Christina and Ray's children, but and so academically she's been independent, but she's feeling this deep, deep sense of loss in the socializing and the organic, you know, chit chat and all that happens. And as an immigrant parent who had immigrant parents too, I am not the champion of mental health and care, and so it's been hard to try to help her in these ways. But fortunately, the school has, you know, sent out a lot of information about middle schoolers and age-appropriate self-care, and she happens to have health right now as one of her classes, so I think that's helping. The other issue for me is, you know, the pandemic is just amplifying a lot of inequities that have, you know, have always existed. And one that is deeply personal to me right now in this pandemic is anti-racism and lack of support and acknowledgement around that. I think as a community member, it feels like I am visible, that no one is saying anything about it. And, you know, we've been, I think, largely invisible in this racial educational equity space, Connecticut. So that's the thing that I've been trying to advocate for in our school district right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Yukio. So the next question we have for our panelists, considering the top two challenges that you shared with us, how have you been able to skillfully share your needs and the needs of your child during this time with your school district, and what has been their response? So let's go back to Christina.
So it's been an ongoing situation, just trying to get some more detailed supports or accommodations. I do have to say that the teacher, while she has not had any direct contact with my son since he left school or any of the support service providers, she does reach out to me via email, and she was able to provide me all the cues that they use language-wise within the classroom. So what is our learning target? Just simple key phrases to help him identify the task, keep him on track, or to stay focused. She kind of outlined the different breaks that they were using throughout the day so that I'm incorporating those same things here at home, so that he can stay on task and we can move through all the assignments, which he's been very successful. She's given me a lot of resources as well via email as to, before this, I thought Crew and Foundations were just classes. Now I'm learning Crew was a social emotional learning curriculum. Foundations is a whole learning theory. And then once I was better able to understand it, I was better able to educate my son with it. I say it's ongoing because I feel here in our district needs more support, especially for those students with disabilities. My son left school in March and has not received any direct support for related services. And it creates a lot of concern in me about what that means down the road, especially as we look to fall and hearing that there could be a possibility of either continued distance learning or hybrid models. And not only what that means for my son, but what that means for kids all across the state of Connecticut, in regards to accessing the education and receiving appropriate accommodations, even during the pandemic. And it's something that I'm learning to advocate more about, reaching out to other members of the community to rally more support, because I think that it's been difficult for all children, but I think children with learning differences, it creates an additional barrier. And I'm just hoping that we could get more support around those issues.
Okay. Christina, I would ask you, and just to clarify, so you have been in contact with your son's primary teacher and via email. Have you spoken by phone at all? Or Zoom meeting?
She has reached out to us just to check in about a handful of times. And during those phone calls, it was the same. I mean, just a lot of content so that I could just really support Lennon. What she's able to do. I know other districts around us, they're Zooming with their students, or paraprofessionals are engaging with their students to support their learning. I know that's been a barrier here in our district, and I think it's been a difficult barrier to overcome. I know last night we did get some new news that Zoom would be coming into play, just not much detail about when or how.
Okay, and you're in the Bristol School District, correct?
Yes.
And you haven't been in contact with your son's other teachers as far as whether it's speech therapy or occupational therapy?
The school-based counseling services, just like generic emails, especially in the beginning, that would go out in the beginning of the school closures. But outside of just comments on some of the work that he submits on the distance learning platform, you know, there hasn't been much. I've been fortunate that London does receive my son receives other services outside of the school. So they've been able to provide telehealth services to kind of offset some of that, or even talk to him about what's going on at an age appropriate level, because there has been a lot of loss, especially when dealing with young children and they're in the home and they lose a big piece of their social network.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much. Christina, Ray, can you share how you've been skillfully sharing your needs of your children, and then also how your school district is responding?
Absolutely. I believe my wife and I identified the needs of our children early on. Both fourth grader and fifth grader had different needs. For the fourth grader at Hopbrook Elementary, we voiced our concern by getting in touch with the faculty and support staff through emails, phone calls, Google Meets, that we needed guidance on how to educate our children at home. For the fourth grader, she did not have the interaction via video conferencing, and she missed her friends, she missed her teachers, she missed her teacher, and it was an emotional roller coaster for her, right? And so we got in touch with Kathy Taylor, principal, her teachers. We voiced our concern, and we understood that due to privacy limitations, video conferencing for school-age kids were not really permissible, but somehow they found a way to have a one-on-one contact with my fourth grader. And she was very, very, very happy when she had these meets with them. And that was an exception, but that spiraled into something even more beautiful, because they decided to share those one-on-ones with each student from each class and from the school, you know, because that was a need that was identified for our fifth grader. Because of her IEP, the need for her has always been social interaction. And it was really important for her to have that contact, and she didn't. But we had to address academically, socially, and emotional levels. And she had an increase in Google Meets from special ed teachers, her teacher, the support that they gave. It was very creative in that they called it, they wanted to create a happy home. And I must say that Melissa Cooney, principal at Cross Street Intermediate, and her staff did an exceptional job, because they got together all that were involved with my fifth grader's IEP, and we got together to discuss the IEP and to discuss the challenges and how we will be able to resolve that. They reduced not the volume of assignments, nor the workload, but they reduced the volume and the workload through Power Support and Google Meets, and so that we as parents can concentrate on our own assignment for work. And they responded with teachers having more of a one-on-one, and then they created a well-balanced platform and a work-life balance for all of us at home. So the experience has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks so much. And we're glad that that you were able to communicate in a way that your school was able to respond. And you almost had like a virtual PPT meeting, which was super awesome. So Yukio, if you can finish up and let us know how you're communicating with your school district and what was the response. And then I saw a few comments in the chat that people wanted to hear a little more about what those challenges were, I guess, as it relates to anti-Asian racism. So I think we have a couple minutes to stretch it out. So if
Great.
you want to elaborate a little more and share with us.
Sure. Thank you. So, you know, just as a background, we moved to Connecticut about 5 years ago. And as soon as we were in the school system, there was a racial incident that happened at school with my daughter. And so I have been trying to just advocate in that space and have created relationships with the district leadership and the group educators that are working about racial and educational equity. And also through PLTI, I've been able to make connections with other parent leaders who are really passionate about this work. And at some of the elementary schools, we've been able to implement kind of a parent-led equity group where we talk about these issues, take some actions at the really hyper-local level of the school building to make sure that all our kids, you know, have access to what they need, as well as families when they're together as a school community. And so, you know, even with all of these relationships and connections that I have, when the pandemic hit, and, you know, just nationwide and even within Connecticut, there's been a rise in anti-Asian racism. And I think it's one of those things, right, where when you're being harassed, you want other people to kind of step in and be the intervener for you, because sometimes it's hard as the person being harassed or being attacked to really say something. And you know, this was a really deeply personal thing for me as someone that, you know, as a family that has dealt with it even before the pandemic hit. And so the silence others was really hard. And, you know, and so we have been, I reached out to the district and said, you know, maybe I missed it in all the communications. You know, there's a lot of things that are coming out to make sure that the kids are feeling supported, you know, with the basic needs of the food insecurity, the technology disparities, you know, just access, you know, and connections with the school that maybe I didn't see it. But unfortunately, there really was nothing that came out. And I was disappointed by that, you know, as a district that has a pretty large Asian population, an Asian American population. And so I was able to convene a group of parents to meet with the district and say, you know, just a couple of basic things, right? You know, I think a public statement acknowledging this and, you know, showing your support for our community is a really big thing. You know, just saying that we know it's happening and we are here to help you is a big deal. And so, you know, the district has endorsed the Statement of Unity and Anti-Hate made by the Connecticut Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity on their website, and just continued conversations about ensuring that there is Asian American input in school reopening plans, because if you remember in the beginning when, you know, as a culture, Asians are just used to wearing masks. And, you know, even if they're not sick, even if, you know, if it's not anything that, you know, they're infected or anything, but they wear masks. And so in the beginning, a lot of Asians were being harassed for just wearing a mask, right? And now when you look at who's being attacked while wearing a mask, you know, it's the Black and brown community members. And I think we need to just work together to ensure that, you know, when our kids go back out in public and take the public buses to school with their masks on, that all our kids are safe and we have policies in place, and we give information to the students to make sure that they are empowered to take action if they are on the receiving end of any harassment. And just so, the continued conversations about the short term, what do we need to do to make sure that our children are safe and can be successful? And also just the long term of educator professional development around understanding, the huge Asian American community. And so whether it's, professional development about just historic content, right? And if they want to bring that into the classroom, or if it's, some cultural information that educators might need when dealing with families and care. And so these are some of the that we have been able to discuss with the district, and that they are, considering as some of the short-term things and the long-term things that they need to put in place to make sure that, the Asian and Asian American students and even educators are feeling supported. So if hadn't had relationships with the district, it would have been a harder conversation to have. So I'm fortunate that I had been able to build up to this past however many years. So thank you.
Thank you, Yukio. Thanks so much. And there are a lot of comments coming in thanking you for your bravery and to stand up for not only your child, but other children within the school district. And so I would also ask our panelists that if you don't mind putting your email address into the chat, because there might be people who want to connect with you afterward so that you can share more about your story or how you're being, successfully communicating and working with the school district, or maybe they may offer some additional strategies or want to partner with you. So if you can do that, that would be awesome. And I would like to thank you, our panelists, for your great work in sharing your stories and what you're doing to really be productive and to be positive about how you're communicating with your school district and advocating for your children. So if we all can give them a little round of applause, little claps, hand claps, that would be awesome. And now we're going to turn it back over to Betsy. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Melvet. And I too want to just thank the bravery and courageousness of our parent panel. One thing, one thing that I've heard over and over again from parents is that, and I think we heard it here today, is that just ask us. So I think that, it was probably, it was either Yukio or Christina or Ray who said, ask us and let us, and every person here, make sure that when you go back, just if you can connect with parents to find out, some more information, that is incredible.
Oh.
So I'm just going to, oh yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I turned it back over to you. But what I really wanted to do before we went into our breakouts was just to talk a little bit, really quick, about the process and some of what you heard with our parent leaders. And so, they have created these feedback loops. And a feedback loop, as you can see on your screen, is a two-way stream of communication between someone who designs a program or service and someone who uses that program or service. So for example, Yukio talked about having already established a good relationship within the school district. And as they were thinking about doing programs and things like that, Yukio and another team of parents were there to provide insight and feedback. And then so what makes it a loop is that the school district then responds and provides a response with what they're doing based on the feedback they've received. And then so there's this continuous loop that enables both parties to communicate and share with each other, and also to feel that they are responsible for the outcomes and the end results. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Betsy because she's going to lead us into our breakout groups.
Great, thank you. So here's the question, and I love this because this is an imagining, right? So it's really using your imagination, right? Imagine ongoing two-way communication that involves continuous feedback loops between families and schools to ensure that all voices and ideas are heard, honored, and acknowledged. So the question is, what would this look like? And how would it feel for you in your role as a parent, a teacher, a student, an administrator, all of our folks here in our learning community?
It's like the closest we get to like actually seeing people. So thank you everybody for sharing, for talking. We had a great discussion in my group, as I'm sure you did in yours. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just real quickly ask each of our facilitators to give us, as Betsy said, we're going to do an aha moment, just one. And that sounded like a really good rule when we were planning. But now that I have an entire breakout discussion to capture, I was like, I can't do just one. So I'm going to highlight a couple of words that we kept coming back to in our discussion. The first is vulnerable, and we were very impressed with the parent leaders who were so articulate about their vulnerability and how they spoke with passion and confidence about things that were very personal. And so I think one of our takeaways is for any feedback loop to work, people are going to have to feel safe being vulnerable and expressing their needs. And that comes from a sense of, as we know in family engagement, the relationship based on trust and respect. So let me move to our next speaker. I think it's Melvette. I think you're going to share an aha.
Okay, great. So we had like a real good full page of notes, so I'll send that on for all of you to look at later. But I think there were three big words that came out of our group. There was a lot of good sharing. And when we talked about if the two-way communication feedback loops existed, they would need to be continuous. And the three words that came out of that, in how would we feel in a space where there was this continuous feedback loop? And the words that came up were all parties, so parents, students, and school district staff and administrators and teachers would feel empowered. There would be this sense of authentication, and there would be efficacy. And so those were really three big words that I felt summed up the understanding and the feeling of the need for these feedback loops and for them to be in place, and how people would feel with that type of outcome. That's it for me. On to the next person.
All right. Thank you, Melvette. And our next facilitator is Regan. Hi, Regan. Thank you for being here.
All right, so same as all of the rest of you is it's going to be tough to just do one. So I'm going to, since Judy led us, I'm going to do two. So our group was very similar to Judy's group. So I think the two things that I would speak on is sort of what you talked about with the connections and the relationship, that it's, you know, teacher to student, teacher to parent, to the whole district. And there has to be this trust that people can say, sort of as Judy said, be vulnerable and be authentic. And that includes the teachers too, that if the teachers want to, so maybe say they want a kid tested, and maybe that's not the politically correct thing to say, that the teachers should feel safe in being able to communicate that out to the district. And it goes sort of to the culture of the district if there is this trust and true relationship connection. And then the other thing that came out, which was not a word we used, but I think it summarized it, is flexibility. So in terms of communication, it could be phone calls, it could be emails, it could be apps. You could enlist your community partners to help with communication. You can enlist volunteers to help with communication. You have to be willing to be flexible in order to find the best way to communicate between all the parties involved.
Thank you. Terrific. Well said. Yukio. Hello. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you everyone, and for sharing various stories from the educator's perspective and families' perspectives. And some of the things that came up in our group was that, you know, in order for it to be a loop that works, right? It shouldn't always fall to any one party to initiate, and that there should be multiple ways to make contact. And so, parents feeling like that they're always the ones that need to reach out is hard. And when you have parent engagement facilitators or people that can make that other connection you two, that kind of alleviates your stress as a parent in kind of your need of attention. And so, having lots of other people within the community to advocate for you. And, there were great things that we heard from schools that they're trying to do. And again, the loop isn't just through email, it's through phone calls, a quick drive-by, it's through text, through the various online apps. But the assumption is there, though, right, that all parents have some sort of technological know-how, be able to receive messages in those ways. But if you're doing it in the multimodal ways, the phone call, right, just a plain old good old phone call is all it takes to start that loop. So thank you.
Thanks, Yukio. Janine is our next facilitator.
Hi, good morning,
Hi,
everyone.
there you are.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi. So our group had a really great discussion, and we actually broke ours down into school administrator, parent, and CBOs, like how all these entities could work together to make sure that feedback is good, effective, and that parents feel like their voices are heard and that the information they're shared is reaching the right ears and is being worked on. So one of the things that everything that everybody said about multiple ways of engaging, we were fortunate to have a principal in our conversation, a former principal, I'm sorry, and he talked about the importance of having things like a breakfast with the principal and compiling data at that breakfast, but also sharing information at the following breakfast so that parents know and understand that the information is being used and how it's being used. And we discussed how critical it is for teachers to reach out to parents individually and for principals to keep parents engaged through newsletters, principal chats, especially now that we're in distance learning, using Zoom to do breakout sessions for those chats. But we also talked about good old-fashioned mailings. And one of our participants had a really great idea because she said that, the big envelopes could be intimidating. So why not use a color-coded mailing system so that parents know that when mail is being received, they'll know what topic is being discussed at a specific event, or instead of using a flyer because they get lost, do it on a postcard. And then we heard from a parent who said that, it is important for parents to understand the data. So understand why the surveys are being requested, understand what it means, how the information is being used. So she talked about having data nights for parents and for parents to be able to provide feedback during those data nights. And from a community-based organization perspective, we talked about using things like a community cafe to get parent voice. And it goes back to providing different options for parents, because not all parents work well in group settings. Some prefer one-on-one, and using social media and other things to connect works as well. So it's having a variety of options to reach parents, for parents to share, and for for the administrators to also give that information back to parents.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to our last facilitator, Betsy Laborious.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I just want to thank our group, and I want to say we had an incredibly courageous and brave group of people that talked in our session. And we talked a little bit about just the condition of the conditions, what, a lot of times what people are dealing with in terms of grief and other kinds of things. But the big aha, I think, is what everyone talked about, and that is a lot of the times it takes one person. And it takes that relational piece for a parent or on a teacher side as well to feel safe enough to be able to connect. Feel like if I talk, I will not be judged. I can ask for things, establishing that whole trusting relationship. The other aha moment that came out of our session is don't give up. A lot of the times, you know, when you're calling, you may come up as a restricted number and parents just don't accept it. But if you, there are ways, and what I heard from a lot of folks in our group is that when you don't give up, you know, that there is positive results. So that was another important. And the last piece was really to look at not only the people that are sitting in the room, but really think about, you know, do we have community providers that can help us kind of spread that word? You know, are there community agencies? Are there faith communities that can be the intermediary to help people then to kind of establish that relationship? And so there's a lot of great work going on, and I just want to thank the group so much for being so open, being so honest, and being so brave in their recommendations. I want to thank again Melvet and all the parent leaders that participated, not only in the panels, but facilitation. And the great, we do have a robust network of people here, and so I want to thank you. And the last thing I'll just say is, you know, what started 6 years ago is an experiment. Wood Friday Cafe work has now just kind of expanded and thrived, and that is because of people who come and share their points of view and give us good feedback. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe.